More discussion of the circulatory system or cardiovascular system. Here we're going to talk mostly about blood. Now, blood is a liquid connective tissue, and let's say we have a test tube where somebody draws your blood and puts it in this test tube and fills it up to this level. Then they take this test tube and they centrifuge it so that the blood cells form a packed cell volume at the bottom and the liquid is at the top. So this represents the volume of whole blood, everything in blood. Here would be the blood cells, which would occupy some 45% of the total volume, and the plasma, the remaining 55%. Now, blood plasma, of course, is water and everything dissolved in it. This includes blood gases, dissolved proteins such as clotting factors, antibodies, immunoglobulins, albumin, and nutrients, waste, things like that. All of that's in plasma. The blood cells are manufactured in your bone marrow by stem cells on a regular basis. You're constantly making new cells, you're constantly getting rid of old ones. Now, the vast majority of your blood cells are red blood cells or erythrocytes. They contain hemoglobin, they transport oxygen, that's what they do. At the very top of this packed cell volume is a very thin layer of leukocytes and platelets. Leukocytes are white blood cells, they're involved in immunity, defense, and platelets, of course, are involved in blood clotting. Now, when it comes to forming a blood clot, what triggers it is injury to a vessel. And how does the body know that? Well, remember in a previous video or another video, we talk about how the blood vessels are basically three-layered wall, and under an ordinary circumstance, the blood is only in contact with epithelial tissue, but a damaged blood vessel exposes other tissues to blood and triggers this whole clotting process. Well, the platelets come into play. They form a platelet plug and they start releasing chemicals causing chain reactions of clotting factors. And I'm making a very long story very short, but ultimately what happens is that a protein mesh of fibrin forms and it traps blood cells and forms a blood clot, stopping the bleeding. Now, blood gas transport involves oxygen and carbon dioxide. Remember I mentioned hemoglobin transports oxygen. It's going to pick it up at the lungs and then it's going to carry it to the tissues. But how do you get hemoglobin to let go of the oxygen at the tissues? Well, tissues are producing carbon dioxide, and carbon dioxide does cause a little bit of carbonic acid to form in the fluids, and that lowers the pH, and that is known as the Bohr shift, which allows hemoglobin to let go of the oxygen as the pH changes slightly, and now the oxygen is free to diffuse from the blood to the tissues that need it. So that's how you get the oxygen from the blood to the tissues. Now, carbon dioxide transport is a little more complicated because it's transported in the blood in several ways. Well, some carbon dioxide is simply dissolved in the plasma and it's going to diffuse out at the lungs when it gets there. A little bit of carbon dioxide is also going to be bound to hemoglobin, and when it reaches the lungs and the lungs allow oxygen to go in, it makes it kick it out, and that too diffuses out at the lungs. But most of it, some 70%, is retained in the blood as the carbonic acid bicarbonate pH buffer. Your body uses these two substances to balance blood pH at approximately 7.4. So this is our overview of blood and so forth.